Hi, I wanted to talk about sewing sheepskin just a little bit. I'm working on a sheepskin coat pattern, which I wasn't sure I was going to do until I did all these tests and made sure I could have a really good seam, found a seam that was strong enough, a type of sewing that would be strong enough. So I'll talk about some of these tests and stuff, how you might want to do different techniques depending on what you're making or how durable you'll want it to be. But I've been sewing and making sheepskin stuff for several years now, and I've figured out a few things, maybe some misconceptions and whatnot as well. But for the coat, I tested everything from corners to what type of seams I would do if they were turned under, over. A lot of these are kind of sloppy because they were quick, but like this hat, just a single whip stitch was enough. You just punch your holes, and it's just that whip stitch all the way around. A double whip stitch I think looks a little bit better, and it's a little bit stronger. And I do that. I have a lot of prototypes sitting around, so I like to keep them for tests and things. So this is just the double whip stitch. And you can see if you pull it enough, and I've been working at this, you can get those holes to open up a little bit. But if you want it to be real strong, you can see I was really yanking on this for a while to try to get it to tear if I could. Those have opened up a little, those holes, and that's just the double whip stitch. But if you also do a saddle stitch after you do that double whip stitch, I've been really trying to get this to rip or even just open those holes up a little bit, and I can't. Like, that's real strong. As soon as I figured that out, I started working on that sheepskin coat pattern. I did test some different sewing on a machine and things. If you're going to be doing just a single stitch for a coat especially, that's going to be the strongest is where you put the two parts together and it folds to make like a standard seam allowance. That's going to be pretty strong. That double whip on top just helps hold it a little bit more even. And a lot of sheepskin coats are done where the panels are just placed on top of each other. This one I was able to rip. So two parts just placed on top of each other, 2 rows of stitches, and that's what this was. And with enough manipulation, I was able to just get that to rip. So even if I was to place them way over, do 8 lines of stitches, that type is going to rip at the weakest side either way. So I really didn't find that to be stronger. If anything, that's going to be weaker. The strongest stitch I found was that double whip with the saddle stitching. On top of that, you can turn your seams inward. Any of the seams that for any of my patterns, excuse me, any of the seams for any of the patterns can just be turned inwards. And I do suggest if you do that, you're going to want to trim back to the holes so you can see. If you can't see those holes, that makes it real hard to sew with those seams turned inwards. On top of that, I also would do round hole punches or round stitching awl, because like a diamond stitching awl or a stitching chisel, or even if you're doing it on a machine, if you have like a leather needle where it's more of a diamond shape, it makes a cut. And those cuts are more prone to tearing versus a little round hole. Not a ton, but I did notice a difference, so I would suggest that as well. And you can see if you pull, this one is just saddle stitched from the back side, and then this part of it is got the double whip and then saddle stitched. So you can see more of the stitches that way than you can this way. I mean, if you pull hard enough. I will be finishing that coat video up eventually here, and I'll talk about a couple other stitches and different techniques while I'm doing that. But this is the gist of it. If you're going to get any of my sheepskin patterns, mittens and hats, double whip is enough. Or, sorry, I should say a single whip stitch is going to be enough. I do like the double whip stitch. Might be just a little bit stronger. But if you're worried about it not being durable enough, putting that saddle stitch on top of that makes it crazy strong. But I've had some of these hats being used for a while, and even just that single whip is just fine. Eventually, with a lot of pulling, some of those holes might open up a little bit. Real quick again, that method where the two parts are just placed on top of each other in a double stitch on top, it does work good if you have a woven fabric, because that will pull across both of those lines of stitches. The threads go all the way across, whereas the fibers in this are shorter and it doesn't quite make it all the way across or something. It just isn't as strong. Something about having the fibers in leather and sheepskin go across that angle just makes it that much stronger. It creates more tension as you're trying to pull it around that corner. Something like that. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it's kind of what I figured after all these tests anyhow. I also tested a bunch of buttonholes and things for that sheepskin coat coming up. I'll also say if you're sewing on a machine, you can have the seams just like this if you want them to look like that, that is. And it's going to be pretty strong. You don't necessarily have to do that double whip. I think it looks better and it's a little bit stronger, but on a machine, not as crucial. So with all that said, if you have any doubts at all, just grab some scraps, do some different tests for different types of stitching, maybe even test like the density of the skin, what you think will be best for a coat or slippers or whatnot. So keep an eye out for that sheepskin coat video. Hopefully that'll be done in the next few weeks maybe.